Okay, so this is chapter number 2 in the new science textbook of grade 7 from NCERT, the curiosity textbook. And in this chapter, we are going to study about acid, bases, and neutral substances. All right, so let's get straight into it. So the chapter starts with a fun activity about what happens when you use litmus on different kind of substances. Okay, and what is litmus? Well, litmus is nothing but an indicator, right? And the litmus comes in two color, so uh, blue litmus and red litmus. Okay, and by the way, if you ask what litmus is, so litmus is a dye which obtained from lichen, right? And if you remember it from elsewhere, lichen is basically a symbiotic relationship between fungi and algae. All right. Now, so yeah, okay. So let's see what happens. When you test these different substances on the litmus uh, paper or litmus indicator. So usually this litmus is is available in the form of papers. The idea is that the litmus dye is put on papers and then the paper strips are available. So now what you can do is that you can use a dropper to drop the sample onto the paper, or you can also do vice versa, that is take the paper and dip it into the solution. All right, and depending upon whether that substance is acidic, basic, or neutral, the litmus will change color. All right, so for example, lemon juice. Okay, so lemon juice is quite acidic. Okay, it contains acid, and what happens is that it will turn the blue litmus paper red. Okay, so it will turn this into red color, while what will happen to the litmus paper which is already red in color? Nothing. All right, so nothing will happen over here. Similarly, if you take the soap solution, then the soap solution will turn the red litmus paper into blue, but what will happen to the blue litmus paper? Nothing. Why? Because it contains bases. Okay, it is a basic solution, right? Similarly, amla juice, it's also acidic, so similar thing will happen as that happened in lemon juice, while there will be no change over here. Tamarind water is also an acid. Vinegar also contains acid. Baking soda solution contains base. Lime water. Now, what is lime water? Lime water is not same as lime. So, lime water is nothing but calcium hydroxide, and you obtain this when you add calcium oxide in water. So, when you add calcium oxide in water, you get calcium hydroxide, and this is a very vigorous reaction. A lot of heat, huge amount of heat is generated, highly exothermic, so much so that it starts boiling. Okay, so this solution starts boiling, uh, the water starts boiling, right, because of this reaction. And that's why when you do this, you should actually keep the solution undisturbed so as to let the water boil off and cool down later. Tap water. Now, tap water is interesting because it's neither acidic nor basic. It's considered what's called neutral substance. Okay, and this neutral substance will have no effect. Okay, on either of the litmus paper. What about washing powder solution? So, washing powder solution is also quite basic in nature, right? And it will do the same as what soap solution did to red litmus paper, that it will turn this to blue. Well, here nothing would happen. Sugar solution. Now, sugar solution is what? It's neutral. It's neither basic nor acidic. Salt solution is the same. It's neither acidic nor basic, right? And here we can put any other sample. We can test it. Okay. So, right. Okay. So, for example, so what are the um, substances that turn, blue litmus paper to red? So that group, is basically nothing but, as you can see clearly, acidic substances. Okay, and the group that turn red litmus paper to blue, that is basic, right? And the group that does nothing, that is neither it turns blue litmus to red nor red litmus to blue, they are neutral. Now remember that a very important question over here is that what happens, okay, so what happens, so suppose there is a substance A that turn blue, that that does not turn, sorry, that does not turn blue litmus to red. Okay, so what nature is of A? Okay, so remember that if it did not turn blue litmus to red, then do you think that it is acidic? So do you think that substance A is acidic? The answer is maybe, right? Because remember that neutral substances also do not have any effect on litmus. Okay, so if a solution is not turning the color of any of the litmuses, whether blue litmus or red litmus, then either so very likely it is okay. So there's a possibility that it is neutral. All right, and in the case that it did not turn the blue litmus to red, then it can either be acidic or neutral. And in the other case where it did not turn the color of the red litmus to blue, then it could either be basic or neutral. All right. Okay. So I have already explained you that what litmus is. That litmus is a natural substance that you obtain it from the lichens, right? And the substances that turn blue litmus to red are called acidic. Okay, so as we have already, as I already told you in this particular table. So for example, things like lemon juice, amla juice, tamarind water, all of this will turn blue litmus to red, and they are acidic. The substances that turn red litmus to blue are basic. All right, and the ones that do not do any of these are called neutral, which they have not written over here, but it's fine. All right, and because litmus can differentiate between acidic and basic substances, so that's why it's called a acid base indicator. Okay, right. Now remember that indicator is a very general term. Indicator just means something that indicates, right? Okay, and acid base is not just one classification of substances. There are many other classifications that happen. For example, metal, non-metal classification, right? And one can create essentially any kind of classification that they want to. Okay, right? In fact, even acid-base classification is not as simple as it sounds, right? Because there are substances which are strong acids, while there are something which are weak acids. Now, what if I have to differentiate between a weak acid from a strong acid, right? So you also need an indicator for that, right? So that is why indicators can be of any kind. The kind of indicators or litmus is a specific kind of acid-based indicator because that is what it can do. All right, okay. Now another important thing to note over here is that so because litmus is something that you obtain from lichens which exist in nature, so that is why litmus is a natural indicator. Okay, because it is an indicator that exists in nature, right? You do not have to synthesize, but you can also synthesize indicators in the laboratories, and those indicators are called synthetic indicators. All right. I already told you about what lichens are anyways. Okay, so another important point to note over here is that the substances that do not turn either of the litmuses, oh sorry, okay, so there are something called neutral substances. So what are neutral substances? Neutral substances are the substances which are neither acidic nor basic. Okay, right? And what are the examples of acidic substances? So if you remember that in this particular group we classified all these substances over here, okay, in this table. So the group A substances were nothing but the ones that were acidic in nature, right? And what are the examples of such? Lemon juice, amla juice, tamarind water, and vinegar. They all turned blue litmus to red, while soap solution, baking soda solution, lime water, and washing powder solution turned red litmus to blue because they are basic in nature. While on the other hand, tap water, sugar solution, and salt solution did not change the color because they are neutral. Okay, right? Now in this next section, we'll be studying about that. Where all can you find acids, and yeah, okay, where all do they exist around in nature? Okay, so by the way, if you notice, then most of the things like which have been mentioned over here, when you taste, what have you noticed about for example tasting lemon juice or amla juice or vinegar or even tamarind water? that they all are sour. Okay, so this is a characteristic of acid, that acids are generally sour. All right, so these are generally sour in nature, right? But you should always take caution before tasting these things, because some of these acids can actually be harmful for your health. All right, so just because it is acid, you should not taste it. Okay, so for example, things are like hydrochloric acid. You should not taste hydrochloric acid. Okay, because it can burn your tongue. Okay, all right. uh, Sulfuric acid, it can burn your tongue. All right, so these are strong acids, they can actually cause you harm, so you should not taste them, right? On the other hand, the acids which have been mentioned over here are pretty weak acids. Okay, for example, citric acid is one of the acid which is quite in between, it's neither too weak nor too strong. All right, and that is why citric acid, okay, now where is citric acid found? So citric acid is actually found in the lemon juice. Okay, and that's why when you take lemon juice, it feels more, it creates more stingier thing on our tongue than any of the other things. And because the reason is that lemon juice, the citric acid that is there in the lemon juice, lies somewhere in between, uh, as far as its acidic strength is considered. All right, okay. So some common edible substances, the name of the most common acids present in them are, so for example, in many of the citrus fruits, okay, you will find what is called citric acid, right? Similarly, in many citrus fruits, you'll also find another acid called ascorbic acid, which is nothing but vitamin C. All right, uh, and of course, as I said, that they also contain citric acid. uh, Many of the fruits which are not ripened, okay, contain an acid which is called tartaric acid, right? So things like, for example, unripe mangoes, okay, or kacha mango, and for example, tamarind, okay, so they contain an acid called tartaric acid. uh, Also, some other kind of acids naturally found in fruits and vegetables are are oxalic acid, and for example, tomato will contain oxalic acid other than, for example, citric acid. Okay. Now, so this is a fun activity that you should go and look it up. So, for example, lemon, what acids are present in lemon? So, lemon generally contains citric acid, but there can be some small amount of ascorbic acid and other acids as well, right? But mainly it contains citric acid. What about curd? So curd contains mostly lactic acid, right? And how's this lactic acid formed? So curd, if you remember, is formed from the lactofermentation of milk, right? So what happens is that the lactobacillus bacteria, okay, lactobacillus bacteria ferment lactose sugar, which is found in milk, into lactic acid. Okay, so lactic acid is the byproduct, into lactic acid as a byproduct, right? So basically what they are doing is respiration, they are burning this lactose sugar. Okay, but in the process of it releases lactic acid as the byproduct. Okay, all right. What about tamarind? So tamarind contains tartaric acid mostly. And what about vinegar? So vinegar contains acetic acid. Okay, mostly, right? Acetic acid is actually nothing but C uh, CH2 CS3 uh, COOH. Okay, so this is your acetic acid. Okay, it contains two. So this is how it looks like. Okay, this is the structure of acetic acid. Okay, acetic acid is also called ethanoic acid. Okay, so it is also often called ethanoic acid. All right. Okay, now so that is what's about the group A, right? Now let's also see about the group B. So the group B, for example, some of the substances, if you remember, in group B were the solution of baking soda, lime water, washing powder, right? Detergent powder as well. All right. Now, if you notice, right, so if you take, for example, now one common thing, if you would have noticed about all these solutions, right, So you can go back at home, ask your mom about the baking soda and touch it in between your fingers. Then you will notice that it basically has a slippery touch. Of course, we know about, the washing powder and the detergent, that they are slippery because they are soap, right? But surprisingly, you will notice the same thing with the baking soda as well, and with the lime water as well. Okay, right? Lime water not that much, right? In fact, it is mostly non-existent, but yeah, in baking soda and all of these it's very much the case. All right. By the way, what is baking soda? So baking soda is nothing but sodium carbonate. Okay, so there is baking soda, and then there is baking powder. So baking powder is sodium bicarbonate, okay, mixed with other things as well. And baking soda is, from what I remember, mostly sodium carbonate, right? Or it could actually be sodium bicarbonate as well, which I have to check later. But yes, okay. Also, another characteristic about the bases is it tastes bitter. Okay, so you can take small amount of baking soda on your tongue and try to taste it. It will taste bitter. Now, it's actually again not recommended to taste such things, but I think while bathing, for example, you would have noticed that sometimes soap gets into your mouth and it starts, it tastes very bitter. Okay, so that's the general characteristic of bases. But again, you should not be tasting these substances. Okay, in general. Okay, now so that is about so that is about give till general introduction about acid bases and neutral substances. And then we also saw that how litmus act as a natural acid base indicator, right? Now another such indicator is red rose, surprisingly. Okay, so litmus is something that's quite not widely available. You only can get it in pharmacy stores and things like that, right? But red rose, I mean, you have it all around, right? In many of the gardens that you might have visited, there would be red rose. Okay, so usually how you obtain red rose is that you collect the petals of the rose flowers and crush it until it starts releasing juice, and then you filter out all the bits and pieces so that the only solution remains, and voila, there's your indicator, right? Now, so what is observed is that that even the red rose indicator can act as an acid base indicator. All right. And so the idea is that that the red rose indicator can give seems to give red color in an acidic solution and green color in the basic solution. And as such, the red rose indicator has the pinkish tinge to it, right? So as you can see that it has slightly pinkish tinge to it, and in the case of acids it will turn red, in the case of base it will turn green. All right. And interestingly, things like, for example, beetroot, purple cabbage, turmeric, jamun, and gudhal flower can also act as acid base indicators. So it turns out that is because these things contain some chemicals called anthocyanins. So anthocyanins are the molecules that give color to all of these things. Whether you consider the the purple color of the beetroot, or the red pink color of the roses, they all is because of anthocyanins, right? In the case of turmeric, it is because of another um, pigments called, for example, carotenoids. Okay, but the idea is that these substances uh, are color sensitive towards the acidic or the basic substances. Okay, and that is why they tend to change color in one of these things or in both of these substances. Okay, now there's an interesting fact about hydrangea. So the thing about hydrangea is that depending upon the acidity or the basicity of the soil, the color of the flower changes. Okay, so for example, the acidic soil produces blue color flowers, whereas the basic soil produce pink or red color flowers. Okay, so quite interesting. So you don't really have to crush these flowers to get the change in color. All you need is to change the acidity or the basicity of the soil, and we'll see later that how one can do that, how one can change the acidity or the basis. Okay, so this was about red rose. Then similarly you can do it with the turmeric. Now the thing with turmeric is that turmeric does not change color when tested with acid or neutral substances, while with the basic substances it changes color, right? And we have this point written somewhere over here which I have to find. Okay, uh, but yeah, okay, that is what it is. All right. Now we have something called, for example, olfactory indicators as well. So remember that most of these, like all the indicators that we have studied up until this point, rely on the visual cue. Okay. So only if one can see the color, see the change in the color, can one identify whether that substance is acidic or basic, right? But what if the person is blind or cannot, or is color blind, right, or cannot see colors well, or whatever, right? So in that case visual indicators will fail, right? And we will need what are called olfactory indicators. Remember that your taste is also somewhat of an indicator, right? That if it is sour, then very likely it is acidic. If it is bitter, it's very likely a base. But can you use this method widely? No, because many of these substances tend to be poisonous or even deadly to you. So that is why you should avoid using your tongue as an indicator, right? But olfactory indicators seem to be a bit better, right? Now what these olfactory indicators do is that on reaction with acid or the basic substances will release a certain kind of a volatile gas, right? And that volatile gas is something that you can smell and then tell, okay, whether the substance is acidic or basic. Okay. Okay, so now, so here is, for example, one such olfactory indicator. So it turns out that if you take, for example, chopped onions and store it in a container overnight, right? And then what you can do is that you basically put those chopped onions on some cloth or filter paper for overnight, so that the juices from that onion get absorbed, right? Now what you can do is that you can put, for example, few drops of tamarind water on one strip and few on the, so what you will observe is that with tamarind water the smell of that strip is different from uh, had you put baking soda on it. All right. And yeah, so this we have to check out, that what happens, like what happens when you put the tamarind water, and what happens when you put the base soda. They have to check that and let you know. All right, now let's come to the another part of this chapter, which is what happens when you mix acidic and basic substances together, right? So let's do, for example, an activity, right? So in a test tube you put some drops of lemon juice and red litmus solution, right? Now as you know that the red litmus solution does not sorry, you put a drop of blue litmus solution in it. Now we know that the blue litmus solution on the in contact with acid will turn red. All right, and that is exactly what will happen. Now what you do is that drop by drop you start adding so what is it that lime water. Actually they did not mention lime water over here, but anyways, so if you keep adding some drops of lime water, so you will see that for a while the color of the solution still remains blue, but after a certain point of time it suddenly turns blue. All right. Okay, so what happened, right? So the idea is that the the nature of this solution turned from acidic to um, non-acidic, right? Remember that um, you know if you so remember that the blue litmus solution remains blue if it comes in contact with neutral or basic substances. Okay, so the point is that it no longer remained acidic, right? Or in other words, the lime water neutralized the acidity of uh, the lemon juice. And if you remember that lime is basic in nature. Okay, so something basic in nature neutralized the acidity of lemon water, right? That is what this experiment tells you. Okay, and if you keep on adding the lime water, then the solution will still remain, but the idea is that the acidity got neutralized, right? So this is exactly what neutralization reactions are. So neutralization reactions are nothing but a reaction between an acid and a base, because of which salt and water is produced. So this is how one can summarize it. All right, and usually in these reactions heat are also produced. These are generally exothermic in nature. Okay, all right. um, yeah, now what are some common examples of neutralization in daily life, right? So for example, there was someone who was walking around, and the red ant bit them, right? Now uh, the way to treat this, now what happens is that the red ant bites contain an acid called formic acid. Okay, formic acid is nothing but methanoic acid. Okay, methanoic acid, so it's basically COH. Okay, at COH. Remember, ethanoic acid is like an elder brother to this, right? So ethanoic acid or acetic acid is CH3 COH. Okay, all right. And here there's like this part is missing essentially. Okay, so this is methanoic acid. Now formic acid gives a stingy situation when it comes in touch with the skin or the wound. All right, and that is why it causes a lot of pain. It creates that stingy sensation, right? Now what one can do is that so this stingy sensation is actually because of the acidic nature of the formic acid. So the way to get rid of this is to neutralize the acidic nature of the formic acid. So what you have to do is to neutralize it with the help of some basic substance, right? Right. Now, what basic substance can you go for? You remember that one should usually not use strong bases, such as for example calcium hydroxide or lime water, right? Because they are quite strong for your skin and can damage your skin barrier. One should go for milder acids, right? For example baking soda, right? Or a bit of soap solution. All right, okay, these are mild bases and they'll be perfectly fine, and they'll be able to neutralize the acidity of formic acid and relieve you with the pain. Okay, right. Now let's consider another situation. So what happens is that while growing crops, the crops can die if the soil becomes too acidic or basic, right? So, and usually how does that happen? So for example, what happens is that if you use excessive chemical fertilizers, then it can make soil acidic, right? Now if that happens, then that can cause damage to the plant. So to prevent this, one can neutralize the acidity. Now remember that the fertilizers are necessary because they are providing minerals, but the side effect of doing this is that can also make soil acidic, right? So the remedy to this is that you neutralize that acidity with some basic substance. So it could be, for example, spraying or powdering with lime, right? So if you remember, lime was nothing but chewing, right? That quick lime, the white powder, right? So you can just spread it on the soil. Now what will happen is that the moisture in the soil will dissolve it and will produce calcium hydroxide, and that calcium hydroxide will then neutralize the acidity caused by excessive use of fertilizers. Now similarly, what happens is that sometimes farmers can put too much of calcium hydroxide and can make soil quite basic. So what now you can do is that to make it to neutralize the excessive basicity of the soil, what you can do is that you can put organic matter, for example manure or composited leaves into it, because these things release certain acids, and if I'm not wrong, the decomposition of organic matter is release an acid called humeric acid, right? And yeah, that can help you to neutralize the excessive basicity of the soil. Okay. Uh, Now it can also happen that sometimes the soil is neutral, but still the plants are dying or are not growing well. So that means that the soil is devoid of basic nutrients, and so you should consider adding nutrients into the soil. All right. Now let's consider another situation. So, someone lives near an industrial area, and the fish population in that neighborhood is declining. Now, what could be the reason? So, one possible reason is that the factory waste that is getting released, because it's acidic in nature, can make it difficult for the fish to survive in the lake, right? And so, what one can do is that one can neutralize this factory waste by adding basic substances uh, into the waste, so to as to neutralize it before releasing it. Now in general, what happens that one should avoid putting this waste altogether, because more than being acidic in nature, these wastes generally also contain quite toxic substances, right? That are neither acidic nor basic, but can nonetheless kill these aquatic organisms. All right. So ideally one should avoid adding this factory waste untreated altogether, right? But yeah, if one has to do something very basic in nature, then add a base, no pun intended. All right. Okay. By the way, so if you come back to the preface, that we started with, right? That there was a paper which had nothing written on it, but by spraying something on it, something magically appeared. So it seems like it was nothing but what? It was a uh, it was a trick using an acid base indicator, right? So what one can do is that basically one can use an acid or a base, or for example, something like soap solution. So one can use baking powder solution to write something on the paper, and then what one can do is that one can take turmeric solution and spray it on it. So we know that the turmeric solution will only turn red at the area where there is baking soda. Okay. And that's exactly what happens, right? So that ends up this chapter, right? And okay, now let's come to the exercises. So solution turns red litmus paper to blue. Axis addition of which of the following will reverse the change. So remember that red litmus to blue is because of a basic substance, right? So to reverse this change, you will need to add something which is acid. Is lime water acid? Yes. Is baking soda acid? No. Vinegar? Yes. Common salt solution. Now common salt solution is neutral, but a neutral solution can't neutralize an acid or a base. Okay. So the only two options over here are lime water. Oh wait, lime water is also not. I thought it was lemon water. Wait, I also made the same mistake. Okay, lime water is also basic. So the answer is vinegar. Basically, it seems like an odd one out question, right? I mean, you did not even have to understand that what is happening over. You just need to see which one of them is odd one out. Okay. Anyways, so you're provided with 3 unknown solutions labeled ABC, but you do not know which of these are acid, base, neutral. Upon adding a few drops of red litmus solution to solution A, it turns blue. So which means that it's definitely a basic substance. Okay. When a few drops of turmeric solution are added to solution B, it turns red. So that means that B is also basic. And finally, after adding a few drops of red rose, it turns green. So that means that C is also basic. Okay, so all 3 of them are basic. Remember, red rose indicator turns red on acids, and on base it turns green. So all 3 of them are basic. Now observe and analyze in which of the red, label the nature of the solution present in each of them. So if it turns green, it is basic. Okay. If it turns red, it does not turn anything, so it is neutral. And if it turns red, it is acidic. Okay. So liquid sample from a laboratory was tested using various indicators: red litmus, blue litmus, turmeric. So if it did not produce any change on red litmus, remember, in the very starting of the chapter, I taught you this, right? So if it did not turn anything to the red, then either it is acidic or it is neutral, right? And if it turned blue litmus to red, then it is acidic, definitely. If it did not produce any change in turmeric, then is it acid? Maybe, because remember that turmeric does not change color on both acids and neutral substances. Okay. Now Mania is blindfolded. She is given 200 solutions whether they are acidic. Which indicator should Mania use to test the solution bias? Remember that one can use an olfactory indicator. Okay. Olfactory acid base indicator. For example, onion solution is one of them. Could you suggest waste material can be used for writing the message on the white sheet given at the beginning of the what could be in the spray bottle? Various combinations and color of the writing obtained. I think this you can do as an exercise. It's a fun exercise to do. Now grape juice was mixed with red rose extract. The mixture got a tint of red color. What will happen if baking soda is added to this mixture? Justify your answer. So remember that because it changed in color, that means that grape juice contains acid. Okay, and because it got a tint of it, that means that the grape juice is not very acidic. Okay, it contains small amount of acid, right? So the acidic strength is not too much over here, right? Now what will happen if you add baking soda to it? It will neutralize it, right? So as you keep on adding baking soda, so two things will happen. One, this red color will first turn to pink, right? Because that will indicate that all the acid has been neutralized perfectly, right? And so now the resulting solution is perfectly neutral. But now if you keep on adding more and more baking soda, right, the solution will now start turning basic, and then it will start turning green in color. Okay, so these are the two transitions that will happen if you keep on adding baking soda. Okay, so this is something that again you can do offline. How can natural indicators be prepared? Explain by giving an example. So as we have just seen that one natural indicator is red rose, so we crushed that fruit or whatever it is, obtain its juices, and there you have it, your indicator. Now three liquids are given to you. One is vinegar, another is baking soda, and the third is can identify them only using turmeric paper. Explain, right? It's a very interesting question actually, right? So for example, which of them is the easiest to identify using turmeric paper? Soda solution, right? Because soda is baking soda solution. Why? Because it's basic. It will immediately turn turmeric into red color. But remember that it's not so difficult to differentiate between vinegar and sugar solution. Why? Because both of them do not have any change on turmeric. But now how can you differentiate between these two? It's a very interesting question, right? Now here is where you can make use of neutralization reactions. Okay, now remember that neutralization reactions only work between acid and base. Okay, now let's say for example you start with a baking soda solution with turmeric in it, right now had you put sugar solution into it, even if you keep adding sugar solution as much as you want, do you think the color of this solution change? No, it will always remain red. But what if I start adding vinegar into it? After a certain point of time, that red color will disappear. It will again get back to white, yellow in color, right? And that is where you can differentiate between vinegar and sugar solution, right? So the idea is that the vinegar can neutralize the effect of baking soda, and that is how you can differentiate between vinegar from the sugar solution. Now the extract of red rose turns the liquid X to green. What will be the nature of the XB? As we have seen, it should definitely be basic. And what will happen when excess of amla juice is added to the liquid X? So at one point of time it will turn to pink, and then it will turn red. Okay, given that you put a lot of amla juice. Now observe and analyze the information in the flowchart. Complete them. So imagine a garden with plants showing signs of poor health. Okay, now the soil can be either of these two nature, so that when you add an indicator uh, and what happens is then that depending on whether you get acidic or basic soil, you can treat it. So that means that over here it should be acidic, right? Here it should be basic. Now which indicator can be used to test the nature of the soil? So you can use litmus, right? So the way it usually works is that you take the soil, put it in water and dissolve it. So what happens is that anything acidic or basic which is in the water, is in the soil, gets dissolved in water. And now what you can do is you can take blue or the red litmus and dip it in that solution, and it will change color accordingly. Now the acidic soil can be treated with lime, and the basic soil can be treated with manure, okay, or decomposing matter. All right. So this ends the chapter. Okay. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.